Indeed, there is nothing more repulsive than these monsters that defy nature and are known by the name of Witcher, as they are the offspring of foul sorcery and witchcraft. They are unscrupulous scoundrels without conscience and virtue, veritable creatures from hell capable only of taking lives. This hardly sounds like a fair description of our protagonists in the Witcher series. Granted, they may be difficult individuals at times, abiding so strictly to their code that they seem above the plights of the common folk and the gentry alike. But in a world riddled with horrors, we're expected to believe that witches are the single most repulsive monsters in existence? Hey guys, my name is Drew and welcome back to my Witcher lore and mythology series. In this video we're going to take a closer look at the Witchers and we're going to discuss the potential of becoming one. Is it worth it? Through Geralt's eyes, it may seem like a no-brainer. No creature nor arrogant poser can intimidate you, and you have an onslaught of beautiful sorceresses, bards, and even nymph dryads begging for the chance to warm your bed. But there are a great many pros and cons to take into consideration when facing the potential of becoming one of these mutants. Before we get started, I'll just point out that we're going to ignore the fact that usually people do not have the choice to become a Witcher. The privilege or burden is often thrust upon youngsters before they are mature enough to weigh up the consequences. So this is purely hypothetical and I'll be taking some liberties with speculation. Also, I'll be using the Wolf School as a reference point even though there are small variations between the schools. We know the most about the wolves and we learn a lot about their home and the processes by which they become witches. But with that said, let's get right into the pros and cons of being a witcher. So before we can properly talk about living life as a witcher, we have to address the process of actually becoming one. The process is not for the faint of heart, and there is a reason that prospective witchers are taken far away from society in order to undergo their changes. If it were as simple as taking a big red pill and waking up the next day as a witcher, this question would be a lot simpler. Unfortunately, the process is not simple at all, and generally speaking it involves 3 distinct stages, each more grueling than the last. And all of this can only take place once the youngster has been separated from their loved ones, forced to live a childhood and adolescence lacking in love, affection and comfort. Before the trials, new witchers are given the choice, which involves a significant dietary change combined with vigorous physical training. The name of this task and the insinuation that it is voluntary may deceive you. Just because young witches were given free will to make their decision, you have to imagine that there was a great deal of pressure to take on the challenge. These children had been taken from their homes, if they even had one in the first place, and if they wanted to join their new family, consenting to the choice was pretty much a necessity. Assuming you have assented to the choice, your diet will change to a selection of mushrooms, mosses and herbs. This diet of obscure cave-dwelling saprophytes and potent biotic plants causes much turmoil in the digestive tracts of the consumers, and many potential witches yield to liver or heart failure. Sometimes the drastic changes to their body chemistry could lead to insanity or aggressive tendencies that lingered beneath the surface. A severe change in diet is enough of a shock to the system without even considering the unbelievable pressure put on their bodies during the physical training. We get some insights into these regimes from Ciri's training. She didn't take part in the later trials due to the fact that all of the witchers with the knowledge required to perform the trials had long since perished. But Ciri ran the Killer, which is the dangerous mountain pass encircling Kaer Morhen. She fought spiked mannequins suspended high in the air, swinging at her as she danced across a beam held somewhat steady by chains. She also took on the windmill, a device with paws made of sticks which turn and wave, walloping those too slow to dodge. If you survive this dietary and physical lifestyle change, you can move on to the Trial of the Grasses, and this is the one that brings back horrifying memories to even the bravest witches. On the 3rd day, all the children died save one, a male barely 10. Hitherto agitated by a sudden madness, he fell at once into a deep stupor. His eyes took on a glassy gaze, incessantly with his hands did he clutch at clothing, or brandish them in the air as if desirous of catching a quill. His breathing grew loud and hoarse, sweat cold, clammy and malodorous appeared on his skin. Then he was once more given elixir through the vein and the seizure it did return. This time a nosebleed did ensue, coughing turned to vomiting, after which the male weakened entirely and became inert. For 2 days more did symptoms not subside. The child's skin, hitherto drenched in sweat, grew dry and hot. The pulse ceased to be full and firm, albeit remaining of average strength, slow rather than fast. No more did he wake, nor did he scream. Finally came the 7th day. The male awoke and opened his eyes, and his eyes were those of a viper. If I were given the chance to become a Witcher, I would be able to reconcile with the choice. Yes, the diet and exercise may be grueling, but between meals and training sessions, I could recover my composure and bury my agitation behind distracting thoughts. But when the time came for the trial of the grasses, nothing can distract you from what is in store. Imagine walking down into the depths of Kaer Morhen, away from the beauty of the valley and the fresh mountain air. Down in the laboratorium, fluorescent concoctions effervesce and simmer, their mysterious power barely contained within a dense layer of glass. Demijohns of elixirs line the shelves, alembics and retorts drip away sporadically, and ovens glow with the violent amber of burning coals. And with all of these curiosities around, you are tied to an operating table and forced to consume special alchemical brews, with the knowledge that only 3 in 10 survive the ordeal. I'd bet my life that for most people, the urge to run back up the cobbled steps from the laboratory, to flee the castle and never return, would be overwhelming in this moment. But if you don't die in unfathomable agony, congratulations, for now you have a plethora of bodily enhancements at your disposal. We have very few details of the other trials, named the Trial of Dreams and the Trial of the Mountains. It is said that the former is associated with a witch's improved night vision as well as bone marrow and hormonal mutations. It is also believed that this one is responsible for a witch's infertility. But either way, for the sake of this question, we will assume that you have undergone all of the trials successfully, receiving all of the benefits. So we've addressed that major downside of becoming a witcher, but now let's mention some of the fun stuff. Being a witcher means you get a variety of invaluable powers. You may not be a sorcerer, but your training and mutations have turned you into a superhuman in many aspects. You now have the eyes of a cat, or as some may describe, a viper. This means you will miss nothing. Your perceptive abilities are second to none. You can constrict or dilate your pupils at will to see in blinding light or pitch darkness with ease. You are essentially immune to all diseases, and your immune system functions brilliantly. This means you can embrace the full potential of alchemy, enhancing your body and mind with powerful potions that would eviscerate the insides of any normal human. Your reflexes and physical capacity is now more akin to a mighty predator than a human. Your strength, your speed, your reactions, your endurance, all of your physical attributes are exceptionally enhanced. If a human or group of humans pick a fight with you, they're basically resigning themselves to a swift and bloody death, for no mortal can match your hard-earned skill in combat. The combination of extensive training, proper weaponry, potions, and your mutations means that you are now a match for anything in the world, man or monster. So if you choose to use your newfound abilities to follow the Witcher's trade, you can potentially make plenty of money doing so. If you happen to take hits from foes, you can also recover much quicker than a regular person, surviving blows that render a regular fighter unconscious or even dead. And this means healing and regenerating from injuries rapidly. You now also have the power to channel magic. As I said, you're no sorcerer, but the select forms of magic you can use are the perfect answer to many problems. With the 5 Witcher signs, you can cast flames via a pyrokinetic burst. You can summon gusts of wind with a telekinetic thrust. You can form a magical trap on the ground to debilitate foes. You can cast a protective field around you to protect and heal. And most significantly, you can trigger a hex on your targets, using a hypnotic effect to alter their mental state. These signs all have their uses in battle, but assuming you live as a Witcher, you can also use these an infinite number of ways. The ability to start fires could be useful. What could go wrong with that one? A well-channeled Ardblast could dry your hair in the morning, and I don't even want to go into the kind of tricks you could pull with Axii. Lastly, you do gain an incredibly long lifespan and a prolonged youth, which is arguably the most important of the pros of being a Witcher, but I'll go into a bit more detail on that soon. Let's first talk about another negative. An array of new exciting powers could vastly improve your quality of life, but the discrimination aimed at witches in the Northern Kingdoms and Nilfgaard and every other corner of this continent is enough to potentially make you reconsider. As long as you are a witcher with your distinctive animal eyes and usually quite pale skin, you are bound to face prejudice from the rest of society. One book paints a pretty good picture of how the xenophobic inhabitants of the world see witches. This book is called Monstrum, or Description of the Witcher. It includes lines like, "It is well known that when a witcher inflicts pain, suffering and death, he experiences absolute ecstasy and bliss such as a devout and normal man experiencing during sexual congress with his wedded spouse." This leads one to conclude that a Witcher is a creature contrary to nature, an immoral and filthy degenerate, born of the blackest and most foul-smelling hell, since surely only a devil could derive bliss from suffering and pain. And it even incites violence towards the home of the Wolf School of Witches, stating, Kaer Morhen, where these infamous beings nestle, where they perform their foul practices, must be wiped from the surface of this earth, and all trace of it strewn with salt and saltpeter. Unfortunately, this anonymous hit piece on witches displays an opinion held by a lot of people. How many isn't certain, but we know it is enough to lead to the desecration of Kaer Morhen. A horde of fanatics laid siege to the keep, and with the help of mages they demolished the fortress, killing all of the witches residing within its walls, leaving only those who were out on the path alive. Even if you can suppress the visual signifiers of your mutated state, there is also the argument that living your entire youth in an isolated Witcher school may cripple your social skills, leaving you unprepared to assimilate into society. Assuming you put your Witcher powers and traits to use by following the Witcher profession, you will essentially live life as a vagrant, constantly on the path in search of jobs, and there is no guarantee that jobs will be available. Coin is often scarce unless you are lucky enough to pick up a contract from royalty, and if for any number of reasons the contract doesn't pan out as planned, there is the very real risk of people refusing to pay you for your services. Let's not forget that the job is hardly romantic. A lot of the time, the bards who sing about witches sing about grand battles against majestic griffins, whining wyverns, or rescuing a young woman from the clutches of a fiend deep in the woods. But in reality, the job is disgusting. Water hags defecate and throw their mess. Drowners stink of rotten fish and decay, gurgling and spitting as you come within striking distance. And that is only the beginning of the kind of foulness you'll face tracking monsters back to their lairs. One particular example comes to my mind in the short story A Shard of Ice. This story opens with Geralt facing a Zeugl in a boggy midden. The rubbish heap erupted, throwing up viscous, foul-smelling slime, fragments of pots, rotten rags, and pale threads of sauerkraut, and from beneath it all burst an enormous bulbous body, as deformed as a grotesque potato, lashing the air with 3 tentacles and the stump of a 4th. The creature gurgled and dropped, but immediately swelled, hissing, vomiting putrid slime all over the Witcher. All of that, and he's likely to receive a handful of Aurens for his effort. I think I've made my point about the lifestyle of a Witcher and the unattractiveness of the profession, but it's definitely a point to emphasise. If you can stomach the working conditions, if you can handle the hostile glances from the common folk, and if you can grow accustomed to life on the road, that's fantastic. And when you aren't working, you'll have all of your powers at your disposal. But what happens if you step 1 foot wrong in battle? One mistake and you could well be dead, taken before your time and left with no purpose beyond feeding the monster that got you. A huge advantage of being a Witcher is a longer lifespan. Take Vesemir for example. He is said to be at least a few centuries old, while appearing to be a man in his late middle years. That's definitely a big factor, but the question is, can you survive the Witcher lifestyle long enough to make those years count? Or will you get yourself killed within 10 years, making your longer lifespan obsolete? All things to take into consideration. And if you can avoid death, maybe picking contracts carefully, or hell, maybe even becoming a professional Gwent player to lower the risk of a workplace casualty, then you can make the most of your centuries on this earth. With all those years and all those powers, it'd be one hell of a life. But then comes the final catch: sterility. You may live for centuries, but if you choose the path of the Witcher, you must say goodbye to any hope of having a legacy. Your genetic line will end with you. So the question remains, being a Witcher, is it worth it? I personally think it is worth it. If you're born into the royalty in one of the kingdoms, guaranteed a nice life of luxury, it probably isn't worth it. But to the common Joe or Joanne, I feel like it is worth the risk. Yes, the trials may kill you, but unless you have a court wizard at hand, a great many things may kill you. You may end up catching the pox, or hell, you may just get taken by a monster while you're working in the farms. In a place as harsh as the Witcher world, the benefits of being a Witcher could go a long way. But hey, that's just my 2 cents. With all of those pros and cons in mind, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you become a Witcher if you had the chance? If you enjoyed the video and if you think it deserves one, maybe give it a like. Thank you so much for watching this far, I appreciate it so much. Once again, I've been Drew and I'll see you in the next one.